All right, let's jump right in. Whenever we talk about the global AI race, it's always the same story, right? You've got the US and China just sprinting ahead, throwing up these massive data centers left and right. And then there's Europe. It's usually painted as this slow-moving giant, totally tangled up in red tape and running short on resources. But what if that's not the full picture? What if being slow is actually a secret advantage?
And that is the huge paradox we're going to unpack here. Is Europe's, let's say, cautious approach to building out its AI infrastructure a critical weakness that's going to leave it in the digital dust? Or is it accidentally setting the continent up for a massive strategic win?
Yeah, this is the story you've probably seen everywhere. The narrative is super simple. America and China, they've got the scale, the speed, the resources. Europe? Nope. But as we're about to find out, that simple story misses a really crucial and honestly way more interesting part of what's actually going on. Okay, so before we get to the big twist, we've got to understand the problems first. Why is Europe moving so slowly? Well, it all comes down to some very real physical roadblocks. Let's call them Europe's AI choke points.
And look, these are not small hurdles. We're talking about fundamental show-stopping challenges. In huge markets like Germany, the UK, and Ireland, there just isn't enough electricity to go around. Getting a permit to build, that can take forever. And the power grids themselves, a lot of them are just too old or clogged up to handle the insane amount of power these new data centers need.
So it's a tough spot to be in, for sure. But here's where the whole story completely flips on its head. All of those problems, every single one of those constraints, they're creating this really unlikely silver lining. It's forcing Europe to play a totally different game, and it might just be the game that matters most in the long run.
So what you're seeing are two completely different strategies taking shape. On one side, you have the US and China, and they're all in on mastering AI training. Think of training like building the engine of a car. It's the really heavy lifting part, the phase that needs these giant, power-hungry factories to teach the AI model everything it knows. But Europe, it's being pushed in a different direction, towards AI inference. And inference, well, that's like driving the car. It's the everyday use of the AI, asking a chatbot a question. And that requires a different kind of data center, one that's all about efficiency and connectivity, not just brute force power.
Okay, so the big question is, which part of this whole AI world is going to be bigger? The training part or the inference part? Well, according to some heavy-duty analysis from McKinsey, a whopping 70%, 7-0, of all future AI demand isn't going to come from training the models. Nope, it's going to come from actually using them, from inference.
And that is the absolute key to this whole thing. Europe isn't falling behind, it's being forced to specialize. The very things holding it back, the power shortages, the grid problems, are pushing it to innovate and build for the part of the AI market that's going to be more than twice as big as the rest. It's like an accidental masterstroke.
And there's another huge factor that's pouring fuel on this fire, this idea of sovereign AI. What is that? Well, it's basically a big political push for nations to control their own AI future. To keep their data and their AI tools inside their own borders. And that just adds even more pressure on European countries to build this kind of efficient, inference-ready infrastructure right at home, no matter how hard it is.
All of this really points to one of the oldest rules in the book when it comes to progress. It's a powerful idea we've seen over and over again throughout history. Scarcity is the mother of innovation.
And it's a pretty simple but really powerful process when you break it down. Step 1. You're faced with scarcity. You don't have enough power, the grids are old, the rules are a pain. Step 2. That forces you to innovate. You can't just throw cheap energy at the problem, so you have to come up with smarter, more efficient solutions. And that leads to step 3. You end up building something better. You create these higher quality, more future-proof facilities because you had to. And this isn't just some abstract theory either. Major players in the space are starting to see it. Just listen to Jim Wright from the Premier Minton Global Infrastructure Income Fund. He says all these factors are making Europe a critical front in the next phase of global data infrastructure development. Think about that. The real battle for the future of AI might not be fought where it's easy, but where it's hard, in the constrained, challenging environments of Europe.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We always assume that these huge tech revolutions are won by the players with the most stuff, the most resources, the most power, the most freedom to build whatever they want. But what if this next phase of AI is totally different? What if the future isn't built on having everything, but is instead forged by the brilliant solutions that only come from having not enough? It kind of looks like in Europe we're all about to find out.